I was taken to an underground orphanage where all the toys were alive. My parents died when I was young. The house fire that murdered them also destroyed everything we owned. Every picture of our family, every heirloom and memento. To this day, I can barely remember my parents' faces. Thinking back, it all seems like a blur, like a ghostly image of a mother and father without features or expressions. My brother Alex, who was only 9 at the time, managed to carry me out of the house. He was hailed as a hero, and the story played on the local news. It managed to draw attention from a small local toy company called Bittaker's Toys. They had a small orphanage next to their toy company. In hindsight, it was probably all some tax-deductible scheme to make themselves look good, among other things. I remember a police officer with a tight, grim expression on his face coming into my hospital room after the fire. His dark eyes looked ancient and haunted, as if he were 100 years old. "I've got good news, little buddy," he said, patting me on the shoulder without smiling. I glanced up at his flat eyes. They shone like new copper pennies. "Larry Bittaker himself has volunteered to adopt you and your brother. You're going to live at Toyland." I frowned at him, a small boy in an extremely large hospital bed. I drew the sheets up to my neck pensively, using them like a shield. What's a Toyland?" I asked nervously. I looked at his uniform, seeing a name tag there reading, Sergeant Boley. I somehow knew at that moment that I would see this man again. I don't know if I believe in psychic powers or anything, but I had a sudden flash of pale, bloodless faces, men shouting in the middle of chaos and bloodshed, and a blurry silhouette of someone in a police uniform running in with dead eyes. I blinked, and it evaporated like a mirage. "You've never heard of Toyland?" Sergeant Boley asked, staring at me without blinking. "It's a place where kids go when they don't have a family, I guess. All the kids there are adopted or orphans. They have a private school and everything. It's really one of the best case scenarios for you and your brother." I nodded. Even as a small child, a creeping suspicion came over my mind. Was he trying to convince me, or himself? We were taken to Toyland the next morning. Sergeant Boley drove my brother Alex and me to the orphanage. As we pulled in, Alex put a thin arm around my shoulders, hugging me close. "It's gonna be okay, Herbie," he whispered. His blue eyes were wide and uncertain as we surveyed the complex. He was scarecrow thin, and the trauma and horror of the last few days still gleamed darkly behind his eyes. The complex was ringed by a black, metal fence with sharp points like spears emerging from the top. A brightly colored building loomed overhead, its walls covered with fluorescent day-glow murals showing happy children playing with toys that were alive. Roosters and lizards with humanoid bodies and sharp, pointed teeth played on playgrounds in the murals with smiling children. Teddy bears with very human-like fingers and toes climbed trees with excited children. The children's mouths were all open and silently wailing, though whether in screams of pleasure or of fear, I couldn't yet tell. The building had countless smokestacks on the top of its flat roof, each billowing out clouds of black smoke into the air. An enormous sign on top of the building read, "Bittaker's Toys." A black-clad guard in a guardhouse ambled slowly over to the car, leaning down close to Sergeant Boley's face. I couldn't hear what they said through the divider in the police car, but the guard had a grim, set expression on his face. As the gate slid open and we drove past, I realized the guard had what looked like a small arsenal on his belt, holding 2 pistols and dozens of magazines. "Why does that man need so many guns?" I whispered in the back seat. Alex shook his gaunt face. "They probably just keep a lot of important stuff and money here," he said. "Oh," I muttered as the police car slowly pulled up to the entrance, a tall archway with 2 swinging glass doors. All along the front of the building stood tall, animatronic creatures, 6-foot-tall teddy bears with huge black eyes and humanoid roosters with blade-like combs extending from the tops of their pointed heads. They all stood as straight as soldiers, staring ahead in an unblinking, statuesque way. I don't know if they were supposed to look cute, but as a young boy, they appeared terrifying and unnatural. Their mouths stayed straight and expressionless. They had an eerie, uncanny valley feeling to them. "What are those?" I asked Sergeant Boley as he opened the door. Alex and I slid out, carrying all of our worldly goods in 2 small plastic bags. The fire destroyed everything we owned except for the clothes on our back. After all, some charity had given us toiletries and a couple pairs of clothes. I held it protectively against my body, afraid that someone would try to take away the last possessions I owned. "You don't know the Smiling Buddies, about Berry Bear and Mino the Minotaur," he said, surprised. "Well, you'll learn about them inside. I thought kids loved that kind of stuff." "Our parents didn't really give us a lot of toys," Alex said. "They used to send us outside to play." "Ah, well, that's the best way," Sergeant Boley said in a fatherly manner as he escorted us toward the building. Once we had gotten to within a few steps of the bizarre animal mannequins, they came to life. Their eyes suddenly glowed with a pale inner light that stayed far down in the black orbs with an eerie cataract gleam. With a whirring of gears and a grinding of metal, their heads ratcheted over to face us. Their slack, vacant mouths erupted into wide grins, showing square teeth that gleamed with a silvery luster. Their movements were simultaneous and choreographed, like those of synchronized dancers. As one, they raised their right hands into the air in what was probably intended to be a wave, but in reality looked more like a Sieg Heil salute. Their mouths chattered as a song rang out all around us from hidden speakers, but the movements of their jaws didn't exactly match the words, increasing the uncanny valley feeling of the entire thing. They started dancing and twisting their bodies in a strange kind of jitterbug dance. "Welcome, girls and boys. Come to the land of toys, where nothing is as it seems. A place where a child's dreams can rise to the purest joys, and where the nighttime screams of the shadow that destroys fade away to nothing, leaving only the smiles of spring." As soon as the song had finished, the animatronics' arms fell limply down, the light in their eyes fading back to blackness. With a final whirring of gears, they straightened back up into their soldierly postures and went quiet. Silently, the 3 of us went inside. We walked through the swinging doors into a lobby where the floor was paved with black and white squares of gleaming marble. Long wooden tables ran perpendicular to the front wall, covered with computer monitors and TVs. Huge statues of toys surrounded us on all sides. An extremely fat man stood in the center of the empty chamber. His clothes were all bright day-glow colors, fluorescent orange pants and a bright yellow button-up long-sleeve shirt that showed the curly hairs on his chest. His head was shaved, and his scalp gleamed like a fleshy egg. "Welcome, kiddos," he said in a high-pitched, feminine wheeze as sweat trickled down his beet-red face. He took a step toward us. His lips were thick and moist. In a moment, they rose into a wide smile, showing off rows of small, straight teeth. "My name is Larry Bittaker, and this is my toy company, but it is so much more. It's a place where sweet little children like you can live and grow, forever if you want." Slowly, Larry Bittaker lowered his fat face until it was only inches from mine. His many chins jiggled as he knelt down. His stubby, sweaty fingers came up and pinched my cheek. His beady, blue eyes reminded me of those of a pig. We stared at each other for a long moment. Then he turned to Alex, ruffling his overgrown bowl cut. "Okay, kids, be safe. Larry, I'm gonna get taking off," Sergeant Boley said, slowly stepping back from the pig-like man kneeling on the ground in front of him. "Here's my card, by the way, if you kids ever need anything." He reached into his pocket, giving me and Alex copies of his business cards. I stared down at it, confused. No one had ever given me a business card before. It had his name and private phone number on it. I heard Sergeant Boley turn and walk out the door, and then Alex and I were alone with the toy maker. Larry Bittaker seemed to be the only one in the warehouse. We walked past corridors filled with empty toys and staring animatronics. Larry filled the air with his ramblings the entire time. "You kids are really going to love it here, I guarantee it," he said with exuberance. "The other boys and girls are waiting for you downstairs. They're so excited to see new friends come in." A steep metal staircase spiraled down into the darkness. I grabbed Alex's hand nervously, looking up at Larry Bittaker. "Well, go on, little ones. Aren't you coming with us?" I asked in a small voice. Larry gave a boisterous laugh, his protuberant stomach jiggling like jello as his face grew even redder. "Oh, no," he said. "I don't go down there. The little ones tend to smell like poverty." His face drew close to mine. "In fact, I can smell it on you right here." I backed up away from the strange man. Alex's small face formed into a scowl. "You can't talk to us like that," he said defiantly, puffing his little bird chest out. "If you two little shitheads don't start going down those stairs now, I'll throw you down them," Larry Bittaker growled, his porcine face melting into a sneer. The mask of the genial businessman had disappeared, and something cold and dark revealed itself. Glancing backwards, Alex and I started down the spiral staircase, descending into the blackness. At the bottom of the stairs, I saw the gleam of blood-red emergency lights. They illuminated what looked like an enormous maze. As soon as we had gone past the threshold, a hidden door slammed behind us, cutting off the last of the white light overhead. I nearly jumped out of my skin when the metal door smashed closed with a ringing sound. "What is this place?" Alex asked in a small voice. I followed close at his heels. "Where are the other kids?" "Maybe they're all hiding," I said hopefully. "Maybe it's all a big game." Alex looked doubtful. "Come on, Herbie," he said with deep-socketed eyes the color of ashes. "Nowhere to go but forward." The silence rang out around us like a shriek. I could hear my own heart beating loudly in my ears. The floor was covered in steel gray carpets, the walls painted jet black. Incandescent bulbs with dark red glass hung overhead, spread out every 20 feet or so on the dark ceiling. They cast the maze in a bloody glow. We moved forward randomly, taking turns to the left and right. There were strange obstacles in the maze, enormous chairs that looked like they were made for giants, mannequins with glowing red eyes and smooth, plastic faces, and more animatronic characters, pigs and bulls and bears and roosters. The animatronics stayed still and dead, to my immense relief. As we wandered forward, I suddenly remembered something a math teacher had told me a couple years ago in what felt like another life. There is a way to get out of any maze without retracing your steps, the man in glasses had said at the front of the classroom, drawing a small maze as an example on the whiteboard. All you have to do is take your left hand, hold it out to your side, and keep it against the wall. Keep going forward in the maze with your hand kept against the same wall, and eventually you will find the exit. I told Alex about this. A wan smile spread across his lips. "That's a good idea," he said. "I never heard that before, but what if there's no exit?" I shrugged. "Then who cares? We'll still explore the entire maze, as long as you keep one hand on the wall," I said. "It doesn't matter if it's the right hand or left hand, just so long as you keep following the same wall, because a maze is really just one big wall, if you think about it." We continued forward around a corner. I nearly tripped over something laying sprawled across the hallway. I looked down and repressed a scream welling up in my throat. The mummified body of a child lay there. I couldn't tell how long it had been dead, or even whether it was a boy or a girl. The white, beady eyes of rats scurried around it, ripping off strips of the desiccated, jerky-like flesh of the corpse. The clothes were threadbare, worn away over time. The eyes stared vacantly up, as white as river stones. A smell like cinnamon and sulfur rose from the dead body. "Oh my God," I said, a rising sense of panic gripping my heart. I felt it like a tightening noose around my neck. "We're going to die here, aren't we?" Alex didn't say anything. I heard him hyperventilating by my side under the crimson glow of the maze's lights. "Did you hear something?" he whispered. I was staring down at the mummified corpse, transfixed. My head jerked up as if with a will of its own. I scanned the shadowy maze. Far down the corridor, I saw the gleaming of animatronic eyes, the faded cataract light deep in the sockets. With a quiet whirring of gears, they crept towards us. A few steps later, the silhouette passed under the bare red bulb overhead. It was an animatronic minotaur with two black, bulging eyes. Its horns curved gracefully outwards. A smile like a razor split its metal face. There was a squealing of metal as the jaw unhinged, roaring with an ear-splitting electronic distortion. It had legs like a rhinoceros, thick and rounded. Its silver skin reflected the bloody light as it towered over us, staring down with a ferocious hatred. "Run!" Alex screamed, turning and sprinting away. I followed close at his heels, afraid to look back. The ground shook as the metal behemoth's heavy legs slammed the ground. We took random passageways in the maze, trying to lose the minotaur, but I could hear its heavy footsteps drawing closer by the second. Up ahead, I saw a ventilation shaft with the grill removed. A woman's face peered out, looking emaciated and filthy. "In here," she hissed through gritted teeth, her words barely audible over the cacophony of the Minotaur's roaring. Her dirt-streaked face drew back, disappearing in the shadows. Alex was right behind me, and at that moment, I believed we would both make it. I leapt forwards, crawling on my hands and knees into the shaft. The thin metal echoed crazily all around me as I frantically pulled myself forward. Once I had gone forwards a few steps, I looked back, expecting to see Alex right behind me. He was still at the entrance, however. His eyes were wide and terrified. They met mine for a brief moment. He tried to crawl in, to pull himself forward. His small hands furiously dragged over the smooth metal. Then I saw two sharp, steel hands reach down behind him, grabbing his legs. He screamed, reaching forwards toward me. I tried to take his hand, but I was too far away. A single heartbeat later, he got dragged backwards at a tremendous speed. A mixture of agony and mortal terror roiled across his face. "Alex," I cried, crawling forwards. "Come back." A spatter of blood exploded over the wall and end of the shaft. I turned away, crying. I heard screaming behind me, a sound like bones shattering, something slamming over and over against a wall. I crawled forwards through the vents, seeing the bare silhouette of a woman ahead of me, not realizing that I would never see my brother again. "Come on," the woman whispered. The vent turned at a 90-degree angle. It was so dark I could barely tell where I was going. I felt my way slowly forward with my hands like a blind person. "But what about my brother?" I asked. "We need to go back. He could be hurt." The woman didn't say anything. I heard her breathing quicken. "Just follow me, kid," she said. "It's right up here." I crawled forward, seeing a square of red light ahead of us. We came out into some kind of office room. A computer and phone sat on a desk next to crates full of protein bars and bottled waters. Posters covered the walls, many of them with bizarre slogans and pictures. "Feed the bear," read one, next to a cartoon picture of an enormous animatronic bear ripping an elderly woman to pieces. Her walker lay next to her, a crumpled heap of useless metal. Her intestines were uncoiled around her like a den of red snakes. The woman turned to me, her brown eyes set and grim. She had streaks of what looked like dried blood running through her black hair and covering her face. "Who are you?" I asked. "What are you doing here?" "My name's Sarah," she said. "And I used to work for Mr. Bittaker. I helped him build this entire underground complex. This place is massive. There's rooms of food and water, monitoring rooms, miles of mazes, and probably lots of stuff I don't know about." "My name's Herbie, so why are you here?" I said. She shook her head sadly. "When he started to go insane, when I realized he was going to put children down there as prisoners in some evil game, I tried to blow the whistle, tried to get the authorities involved. But he was bribing some government officials, and before I knew it, men in black ski masks broke into my house and injected me with some sort of drug. I blacked out and woke up here a few weeks ago," Sarah said. "We need to get out of here. We need to find Alex and tell people what's happening," I said. She shook her head sadly. "No one will believe us," she responded. I turned away, disgusted by her pessimism. She was supposed to be an adult, yet it seemed like she had given up all hope. I walked over to the computer, trying to turn it on. To my surprise, the screen came on with a white glare. "Hey, the computer works," I said. "Maybe we can use it to call for help." I lifted the phone to my ear, hearing a dial tone. "And the phone works. We can get out of here." "It's not going to be that easy," Sarah said glumly. I ignored her, fishing in my pocket for the card Sergeant Boley had given me. Squinting down at it, I dialed his number. After a few rings, he picked up. "Hello," he said. In a small voice, I answered. "Hi, this is Herbie. Please, sir, you need to come back and help me. The man locked me and my brother underground, and I think my brother is hurt. There's more people down here too. I don't know how many, and I saw a dead body." "Kid, is this a prank?" Sergeant Boley said quickly. "Do you know making false reports is a crime?" Sarah grabbed the phone from me. "This isn't a prank," she pleaded. "Please, you need to come back to Bittaker's toys and get us out of here. Larry Bittaker is insane." The phone line abruptly cut off. The power to the room went out, plunging us into darkness. Over some hidden speakers, I heard Larry Bittaker's voice ring out. "That's cheating," he growled petulantly in his high-pitched voice, sounding like an angry child. "No communication with the outside world. Do you know what happens to cheaters?" Sarah grabbed my hand in the darkness, whispering in my ear. "Follow me," she said. "I know this place pretty well." She led me forward. A few moments later, I heard a doorknob turn. Red light flooded into the office room. We were looking at a half-constructed part of the maze. Wires and pipes in the wall hung exposed, and only the wooden framework of the walls had been put up. "What is this?" I asked. "Is the maze not done?" "The maze is never done," Sarah answered. Larry kept expanding it, changing contractors so that no one would know the entire maze besides him. "I think he'll keep building it until the day he dies. He has enough money anyway." As quietly as we could, we moved forward through the maze, trying to put some distance between ourselves and the office room. We turned a corner with Sarah in the lead. I heard the sudden whirring of gears and a half-choked scream ahead of me. A moment later, I felt Sarah's body smash into mine. Warm blood splashed my face as I fell backwards on the ground. The wind whooshed out of my lungs. I looked up, seeing Sarah's pale, blood-spattered face staring up in horror a few feet ahead of me. A furry paw with claws like railroad spikes came down, slashing her across the chest. Drops of blood covered the walls and floor as Sarah thrashed and screamed, the animatronic bear standing over her with a dried-up husk of a face. Its fur had mostly fallen out, leaving a pale, gray bear skull leering in its place. "I'm Barry Bear," it growled in a low, slowed-down voice. "I want to be friends with you forever. Let me give you a hug." Sarah tried to crawl away as the jet-black eyes of Barry Bear narrowed. Its jaw chattered as silver needles of teeth glistened in its metal mouth. Her eyes met mine for a moment, filled with ineffable pain and terror. I backpedaled away, scooting across the floor, my mind shell-shocked and unbelieving. The heavy body of Barry Bear came down with a force like a battering ram. Its metal arms slammed into Sarah's back, crushing her chest. Bone chips and gore exploded from her body. Blood poured out of her mouth in a rushing torrent. Her eyes rolled up in her head as she gurgled on the ground. Barry Bear's head ratcheted to face me, blood streaming down its face and arms. Its teeth chattered faster, as if to show its increasing excitement and bloodlust. "Can I give you a hug?" I growled. "No, get away from me," I screamed, pushing myself up to my feet. I ran randomly through the maze, hearing the heavy steps of Barry Bear close at my heels. At the far end of the half-constructed maze, I saw a thick wooden door. "Help me," I shrieked over and over. To my surprise, I heard a response from the other side of the door. "Stand back, kid," a deep voice said. Then there was a gunshot. The door's lock exploded inwards. The door shot open as someone kicked it, flinging it hard against the wall. I saw Sergeant Bowley standing there, his pistol drawn, his dead eyes flickering over the maze. They widened when they saw Barry Bear only a few footsteps behind me, closing the distance with every second. "Get down," he cried. I threw myself on the ground without question as he opened fire. The ear-splitting racket of the gunshots reverberated all across the maze. I continued crawling forwards towards Sergeant Bowley, towards safety. I saw more cops running in behind him. I looked up, seeing Barry Bear sprinting towards Sergeant Bowley in a blur, its animatronic face half blown away and revealing the steel underneath. It had an insane expression of manic bloodlust. It raised its right hand, the gleaming metal claws hanging over Sergeant Bowley's head. Everything seemed to freeze then. Sergeant Bowley had his gun up. Frantically, he fired one last shot at the bear's face. The top of its head blew off as its claw came down, ripping through Sergeant Bowley's head with a crack. The scalp hung down in a sick, wet flap as his brains leaked out of his broken skull. Slowly, he fell back. Barry Bear followed him down with a tearing of metal and a slowing of gears in its mechanical voice. The heavy animatronic landed on top of Sergeant Bowley's body, crushing him instantly. A spreading pool of blood marked the site of the horrific murder. Screaming and crying, I crawled towards the police. They carried me outside, under a sky the color of wet cotton. I breathed in the clean air, looking around frantically for any signs of my brother. The police carried other emaciated, frightened-looking children out of the maze, but not Alex. They put me in the back of a car and drove me out of there, away from Bittaker's toys and the nightmares that waited underneath.